Hello, friends. Welcome back to Gym Philosophy in the Morning. I'm the Gym Philosopher. Today, I want to talk about 3 lessons I've learned running paid games. Recently, I have delved into running paid games for the first time ever. I've only been doing it for a few weeks, and I have already learned some big lessons that I wish I would have known before I started. These are slightly deeper than the obvious lessons, and I'm going to dive into it. This is the channel where we empower game masters to run better games. So if that sounds like the channel for you, well, then you have found the right place. Make sure you join our free Discord. Links in the description to continue that conversation. And if you run paid games and you have advice, drop it in the comments. I'd love to hear it. Now, here are the 3 things that I've learned that I wish I would have known before starting these games, and I'm going to kind of describe them as we go through them. So here's number 1. Figure out who your core audience is. I feel like I did a really good job describing the theme, the tone, the style of the game I wanted to play. I don't think there were any qualms about this. I really feel like this was a success for my game. What I did not think about when I started was identifying my core audience. Now, I made a video not too long ago about mixing new and advanced players, and that video kind of touched on this. But I want to actually take this a level deeper, and I want to talk a little bit more about this. Here's what I figured out. I figured out that the new versus experienced gamer thing is part of it. Like, mixing new and advanced gamers can be a little bit difficult. However, I realized that my core audience was not new gamers or experienced gamers. I realized that my core audience are gamers who want to jump in and have a good time, have a relatively chill session with some fun, emotional connection, with some real immersion, some dark themes, some adventure, right? So in other words, I realized very quickly that what I was trying to do was create a game that any gamer, casual gamer, who's like wanting to have a good time, which I think represents the vast majority of gamers, that they can jump in and play the game with me and have a great time doing it. And I will be honest, when I started this adventure, I was a lot more focused on really going hard in the paint on like immersion, grittiness, realism, dark themes, etc. And to be really honest, I kind of formulated my approach to running the sessions and even running session 0 as if it were formulated for people who were advanced gamers who also wanted those things, who wanted to go in depth, who were willing to basically navigate some of the problematic, difficult things that can come with that. In other words, I found myself bringing casual type gamers into a super serious game setting, and I think they would begin to feel a little bit like it was difficult to involve themselves because there was a lot of immersion going on. There was like distrust from the current players toward the new players. Just in general, it was very roleplay heavy, and I did not put effort into making it casual, gamer friendly, a welcoming environment, right? These types of things, right? Here's what I want my games to be. I want my games to be the types of games that if someone hasn't played D&D before, or has played a little bit of D&D, or even is experienced, I could say to them, hey, you should join one of my games and game with me. And then that person, whatever their experience level is, whatever kind of games they've played in the past, they could jump into my game and they could have a great time. They could feel welcomed. They could feel included. There were foundations in place that would allow them to get integrated into the game in a great way that feels good, that's kind of easy. All the players are on board with this, right? And then, of course, we have some dark tones, we have some gritty tones. It is a grimdark, kind of brutal fantasy story. You can have those tones, but you also want to keep in mind who you're running the game for. And I'll be honest, when I first started running these games, I was honestly running them more for the hardcore players, the players who maybe actually are so hardcore that they don't jive well with casual players. And I'll be really honest, when I step back and I think about my earlier player introductions, I experienced a decent amount of churn. Like, there were players who would join play a session and then leave. And I realized, okay, what's going on here? And I think I came to the realization that what was happening was I am encountering a lot more casual players than I thought I would, but I find myself really wanting to make the game a good experience for them. But what was happening instead was I was thinking about this game experience from the perspective of trying to bring in advanced players and challenging them, like kind of not challenging them as in making the game hard, but challenging them as in I'm letting the players role play to their heart's content, even if it means the group acts distrusting of the newcomer. They act almost like they're excluding the newcomer, and the newcomer has to like earn their place in the group, right? This is kind of the culture of gaming I was brought up up in, and I think it caused me to turn a bit of a blind eye to what most gamers are looking for. I think what most gamers are looking for is a really like an environment where they can come right in, sit down, feel welcomed, and have a great time. And honestly, looking back on it, I wish I would have paid more attention to that. So figure out who your core audience is. For me, my core audience is the average casual gamer who wants to sit down, have a great time, feel welcomed, and be welcomed by not only the GM, but also the other players. And that the party is built as such and agrees as such that they are going to make it feel welcome to new players. It's that simple. That might seem like a simple thing that you wouldn't overlook, but honestly, I did overlook it. And I think that in the beginning, I lost some players because of this. So I wanted to fix that moving forward. And that actually leads us to lesson number 2. Draft an agreement to make sure that everyone is on the same page with basically the issue I just brought up a moment ago. Once again, I think I did a great job onboarding players into the style, theme, and tone of the game, but I really didn't do a great job of explaining who I wanted this game to be for and what I expected from players in terms of welcoming new players. Some of the players naturally did a great job welcoming new players, but I will admit there were some times when I could very easily see how new players might feel isolated or excluded from the group because they weren't in it from session 1. And then when they came in, role playing through that distrust and stuff like that, which is honestly like very immersive and kind of advanced role play, but I think it was alienating to some players. And I don't want that. Like I realized very quickly, I do not want that to happen. I want every player to come in and at least feel welcome so that they can experience the game and see if it is a good fit for them. I do not have any illusions about the fact that I'm probably not the GM for every player. If I lose players because I'm not a great GM for them, that's totally fine. What I do not want to do is lose players because I didn't manage player integration well. I do not want to lose a single player about that. And so that's actually the emerging theme of this particular video, is I feel like I was struggling with that specific task. So I ended up drafting an agreement which would basically help me to accomplish these things. And the plan was the agreement was going to have a list of agreements that players would need to agree to. And I'm actually going to put a link to that agreement down in the description if you would like to check it out. But I'm going to kind of read the basics of this agreement for you so that you can see what I'm talking about. So here's the agreement. Player agreement: respectful and cooperative play. By joining the campaign, I acknowledge and agree to all of the following terms. These are mandatory conditions of participation. And here's just the simple of it. I'm not going to read through all of it, but I'm going to give you the highlights, the big title pieces, okay? Party cohesion is mandatory. This is not a player versus player game. No targeted threats or hostile actions toward player characters. No exclusionary behavior. No sabotaging the party or the game. Respect for other players and their stories. In other words, you agree to have respect for other players and their stories. You agree to shared spotlight responsibility. You agree to welcoming new players in a group response, that it is a group responsibility. And this is actually exactly, very specifically what I wanted to pin down. I want players to take on the responsibility of making new players feel welcome when they join mid-campaign, right? And then there's an agreement for the new players. Integrating my character is my responsibility. I want new player characters to really find a reason for their character to work together with the party as best they can. Number 10, collaboration takes priority over character isolation. So we want team collaboration. And then number 11, agreeing that the GM has authority to enforce these agreements, understanding that if a player just directly continues to violate them, they may get expelled from the campaign. I also added a couple other little things: a session rewards and recognition system. So 2 types of things that'll happen at the end of every session. One, there'll be a player of the game vote. All the players will vote on who they thought, in their view, best embodied the principles of the agreement during the session, basically being a great player to play with other people. The recognition is based on observable actions of supported party cohesion, respectful interaction, inclusion of others, and collaborative storytelling. The group would vote. The player who got the most votes will win the point that game. And then there's also a GM selection. I'll choose another player who wasn't the one selected for the player vote, and they'll get a point. And if you rack up 5 of these points over the course of the campaign, you can spend them to basically get a magic item, a special mount or companion, or other in-game rewards, right? And it's treated as a sort of in-game currency. And basically the rewards are granted without requiring in-game gold, downtime, or purchase, right? So they're justified narratively by the GM. So this is something I created to help basically give people reasons to follow the agreement, give them like rewards for doing it really well, and also just to kind of hammer it down and make it a part of the culture of my games. Because the truth is, I want the culture of my games to be very welcoming. And I regret that I didn't think about this as much. I kind of took this for granted. I kind of thought that players would do this naturally, but I really believe that I have come to understand that you need to be very intentional about this when you're running games, and you need to have this discussion with players, because I think if you have this discussion with players from the beginning, they will do a great job of it. But if you do not address it early on, I think it just won't get addressed, and then you're going to have a possibility that as the game goes on, when new players try to come in, they might feel excluded from the core group, and that will make it more likely that they're going to bounce instead of sticking with your game. And then the final piece of advice here, which is going to kind of bring in the other two pieces that I've already given, which is this. Number 3 is settle in, let players join games and play, and trust the process. So when I first started these paid games, right, I didn't really know who my core audience was. I kind of wanted to bring in everyone, but I was running it like I would run it for really advanced gamers who don't care about welcome energy, right? So that's kind of what I ended up doing. And as a result, there was like a mismatch of, I think, motivations there. And I think, like I already described, some players joined and felt kind of unwelcome. I really believe this was the case. So that's one thing that happened in the beginning. I tried to fix that by drafting this agreement. But then here's what happened. When I drafted this agreement and I dropped it into my existing games, and I said, hey, there's a new thing, boom, here's the agreement. I think that this was jarring to some of the player characters. I had players hit me up wanting to talk about it. I had players acting a little like I think that they thought this was about them when it wasn't. Like I had one player in particular who has just been so awesome. Throck, I'm talking to you. and he was just so awesome, but he sent me a message like apologizing for something he had done in the game, which was not at all a violation of these things, but I think maybe he thought that I was trying to single him out with this or something. So it just was messy. It was messy that I didn't talk about this from the beginning and that I dropped it in the middle of it. And this just goes back to say, I wish I would have just put this in place in the beginning. Hence, the point of this video is 3 things I wish I would have known before starting running paid games, because dropping this in, yes, this is good, but I will admit that dropping it in did cause a bit of a mess. And I think that it's going to cause enough drama and mess that honestly, like, I think that it's going to be a little bit abrasive. Like as I try to roll this out and make it seem like a normal thing instead of a thing I'm doing because of a player, which it's not really a thing I'm doing because of any one player. It's a thing I'm doing because of the culture overall. I want to reshape and reform the culture of my games. And I do believe that this is going to be clumsy, and I may even lose a player or 2 over this. I'm not 100% sure because it has yet to play out that way, but I've realized that if you're not careful and you start changing things and wobbling things and you start shaking the house, players are more likely to dip, because I think that what they want is they want consistency. They want to feel good about the game. They want to have fun in the game, right? They don't want to deal with drama. They don't want to have to deal with like a GM who's constantly tweaking things, making them read things, etc. I think that this classifies as something that is just shaking the house a lot. So I wish I would have if we had gone through this in session 0, there would be no problem right now. That would have eliminated, like if I would have understood who my core audience was, I could have put this agreement in place from the very beginning, and then there would have been no reason to like draft it because it would have already been taken care of. And bringing it in from the very beginning would have been less jarring and less abrasive, and it wouldn't have caused drama itself, just dropping it in. So with that being said, I will admit, it feels a little bit like a mess right now for me. I feel like my games are a little bit of a mess because of all this, and I just regret that, and I wish I would have done better setting it up. With that being said, I am very glad I've learned these lessons, and this just goes to show I've been running games for over 24 years, but I've never run paid games. I have never dealt with this many new players all at once. I have dealt with adding players, to new games, but my experience has mostly been running 10-year-long epic campaigns with the same 6 to 12 people, and then just having a few people rotating out every campaign. So bringing in new players, introducing them to the culture, I will admit this is a new level for me in this area, in this arena. And so, I am very excited to get this figured out so that now as I bring in new players, there will be that cohesiveness. There will be that welcoming feeling. And of course, if you would like to join one of my games and check out what all the hullabaloo is about, well, link to my Start Playing Games profile is in the description. Friends, thank you so much for coming back for another episode of GM Philosophy in the Morning, empowering game masters to run better games. This is what we do here. So hit that subscribe button, hit that thumbs up button, and leave me a comment. Let me know what you think about these lessons. What would you add to it? What is your commentary? I'd love to hear it. Thank you so much for coming back. I will see you awesome people on the next one.